Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Rachel Lang Show. I'm your host, Rachel Lang, and I am so excited that you decided to dedicate part of your day to being with us. And you have picked such an extraordinary moment, an extraordinary time to tune in and to ask what you can do to awaken to the energies of this moment. The astrology of March is big. It is some of the biggest astrology that we have this year, 2025, but also just in general in our 2020s. There are so many astrological signatures that converge all at this time that build up to a crescendo and that catalyze change for the future of the consciousness of the world. And here we are. How can you make the most of this energy? How can you make the most of this time? And what does this mean for you? So today we're going to talk about the eclipses. There's one on March 13th or March 14th, depending on what time zone you live in. And there's another one on March 29th. We are going to talk in depth about the astrological nature of eclipses and what they mean for you in general and what they mean for you at this time. We're going to briefly touch on Mercury retrograde, Venus retrograde, and Neptune entering Aries. Neptune dips into Aries for just a few months this year, and then it goes back into Pisces before fully starting its new 165-year cycle. You can imagine that when big cycles are ending and then beginning, that there are also aspects of our culture, aspects of our lives that are coming to a close. And sometimes it's a screeching halt. So it's not always the easiest influence, but we are ready for it. We are ready for big societal changes, cultural, global changes. Think about this episode as you are marching forward. And that's really the phase that we're in. That's the cycle that we're in, with so many new beginnings culminating and gearing up to happen, and so many sometimes really painful endings moving us toward those new beginnings. Before we dive into the eclipses, I want to take a moment and just set a stage for you for looking at the time leading up to the eclipses and the time immediately after the eclipses. And in the background, during these eclipse activations, we have some personal planets going retrograde. Venus stationed retrograde on March 1st, and it goes retrograde until April 12th. And Mercury stations retrograde the same day as the lunar eclipse on March 14th, and it goes retrograde until April 7th. Retrograde planets are more visible. They're closer to the Earth than they are at other times in their orbital path, and we feel the energy stronger. We can see it brighter in the heavens. How many of you have looked outside and noticed the planetary parade with all of those planets visible? That's because when planets are retrograde, they're farther away from the sun. And that means that they're going to be in the sky at a different time from the sun. So we're going to be able to see them at night. And anything that we can see symbolizes anything that's coming up from the shadows, that's making itself known, that's becoming visible. And so when a planet is retrograde, we see the good, the bad, and the ugly about the influences of that planet in our lives and about everything that that planet symbolizes for us. When we're talking about Venus, Venus stations retrograde about every 18 months, and it's retrograde for 40 days. Think about that being the time in the desert, metaphorically, like in the biblical sense of the word. Venus retrograde cycles are times when we don't have as much access to pleasure, when we have to work extra hard to have a good time, to connect with others. We can feel alone. Venus is the planet that relates to our relationships and also our finances. And so a lot of times Venus retrograde cycles are when we are reviewing those aspects of our lives. And we can almost take a microscope to those aspects of our lives and identify what's not working and what's working, and we get really clear about the aspects of our relationships that just aren't healthy for us, or ones that need a little bit of tweaking or a little bit of repair. This particular Venus retrograde starts in the sign of Aries. And so you might notice that with your friends, with your family, with your partner or your spouse, that you just need some time alone. And Venus in Aries also brings up any questions of self-negation or questions of self-love, really. It invites you to be more receptive and to nurture yourself. And maybe there are things that you're not getting from the people in your life in terms of emotional support, in terms of nurturance. So Venus retrograde is one of those times when you step up to the plate and say, I am going to love myself the way that I want others to love me. And I am going to love myself the way that I want to be loved. And so that's the opportunity that you have right now. And when Mercury stations retrograde, that happens on March 14th, there's a whole nother level of that. And that's because Mercury starts its retrograde journey in Aries too. So there's a lot of individuation energy happening. And the eclipses are going to punctuate these themes. So that's why I'm setting the stage with Venus and Mercury retrograde. Mercury retrograde is one of those times when we are aware of the truth that we don't always want to see about ourselves, about others. It's a time when we're evaluating how we communicate, and we're rethinking decisions that we've made, reorganizing our lives. I find a lot of times I will end up cleaning out closets or going through old photos and purging, letting things go. And this is a great moment for that, because with so many cycles ending and new ones about to begin, we want to enter those new cycles clear, untethered from the past or from people who represent unhealthy dynamics that we are moving away from. Mercury retrograde and Venus retrograde together can be a time when people are coming back into your life. Someone that you dated previously, an ex-partner, a coworker, maybe an estranged relative. And the opportunity that we have during this time is to reevaluate all of those relationships and to use them as a template for what we want to place into the future. A lot of times exes come back into our lives because they remind us of different versions of ourselves, past versions of ourselves that we used to be, past interests, past hobbies, past, the times when you were really passionate, when you embodied things that you have moved away from, or personality traits that you have moved away from. The point is to bring some of the very best from the past into the present and integrate it for the future. So integration is a big key word when we're talking about some of these larger cycles and some of these transits of the month. The 2 weeks between eclipses can feel like you're going through a tunnel. And if you've driven through a tunnel or taken a subway through a tunnel, then you understand that it feels compressed. It's dark. You can't see things as clearly. And so you might not be able to identify the motives in other people, or you might have a lot of emotions that are surfacing from your own psyche. And there's always a light at the end of the eclipse tunnel. And usually this is like the events that you have right on the other side of this. There's glimpses of hope. There are glimpses of the future that you can get a sense of while you're moving through the dark. Sometimes they come in the form of a meditation or an intention. Sometimes they come in the form of a conversation or a relationship. So we want to keep focusing on the light and finding opportunities to bring light in. So that means through meditation, through your spiritual practices. That means through journaling, through physical exercise, taking a hike, being in nature, being with people you love. Focus on bringing light into the darkness. I find too, going to see a counselor, talking to your therapist, talking to an astrologer, talking to a healer, also really helpful, because there are so many different things that you want to unpack while you are moving through the deep emotional experience of that pressure cooker between eclipses. Why is this 2-week period so intense, you might ask? Well, the symbolism of eclipses is really rich, and so I want to talk a little bit about that. Eclipses happen when the sun, the moon, and the earth align in a way that shadows are cast on the earth. So either the sun's shadow or the moon's shadow. And the lunar nodes are involved. The lunar nodes represent those meeting points between the sun, the moon, and the earth. Think about a shadow. A shadow is when you can't see the light of something. And so you're seeing like the dark side of something. And during eclipses, we see shadows. Now, we could do a whole episode just on shadow work and how shadow relates to astrology. But to simplify it, there are parts of us that are kind of in the dark, aspects of our personalities, aspects of ourselves that we don't feel comfortable with, that we don't want to look at. And so what happens is we have other people in our lives who become projections of that. They are people who represent the aspects of ourselves that we don't like to look at. And here are a couple of examples. So one example is, let's say that you attract people into your life who have a lot of emotional needs, who want to talk about feelings and who want to process feelings. And you consider yourself to be a logical person who doesn't have a lot of time for emotional processing. Well, that is a shadow aspect of you. Because if you're attracting these people into your life who are showing you something that you probably need to do, you might need to take some time feeling your feelings. You might have emotional needs that aren't being met. And so that would be a shadow. And the people in your life would be like mirroring that shadow. And perhaps at some point in your childhood, your parents told you, or your teachers or your grandparents told you that it wasn't okay to feel your feelings. And so you built up all these walls, you built up this identity around not having emotional needs. I'm good. I don't need anything. It's a waste of time to talk about my feelings. Well, by ignoring the sensitive little part of you that really does need that emotional connection, by ignoring that, you've pushed it into the shadows. And so during the eclipses, you're going to draw needy people into your life. You're going to draw experiences that push you into addressing those emotional needs. Let's take another example. Let's say you draw narcissists into your life. People who are very arrogant, egotistical, who want to control everything, who are selfish. And perhaps you grew up hearing over and over again, it's not okay to be selfish. This is bad. Don't do that. Good people aren't selfish. Don't be a narcissist. And so throughout your life, you push yourself back. You suppress your own desires. You negate your ego and you play small. And so you draw people into your life who are not afraid to put themselves first, or to ask for what they want, or to be controlling. And so there might be something there in your shadow that is more self-directed, that's willing to bulldoze toward what you want. And during the eclipses, you might draw people into your life to reflect for you how to stand up for yourself in those relationships. So we're not becoming our shadow, but we're integrating the qualities of our shadow that are healthy and that want to be expressed. And essentially what we're doing is we're falling in love with the whole of who we are. And we're embracing aspects of ourselves that could be discarded as unworthy. And in doing so, we're learning how to be more accepting and tolerant of others, and we're learning to have more confidence. When we love the parts of us that insist on being in debt, that want to be bitchy, that want to cry and scream and isolate, when we love the parts of us that we have spent a lot of time suppressing, then we rally more of our own power. We live in more of our authenticity. Not only that, the shadow tends to run the show behind the scenes. And so by integrating our shadows, by loving those parts of us, we're helping to end cycles of self-sabotage and also clear the path for anything that we want to create. So that's what we do with eclipses in general. This is all the time, and this is why they're so significant. One other thing I'm going to mention here is that the sun and the moon and the earth have interesting symbolism. The sun represents the spirit. It's what we came here to do and how we came here to express ourselves. So it relates a lot to our goals, to the path that we are here to carve out for ourselves, create for ourselves. The moon represents the emotional imprint from our family of origin, from our ancestry and DNA, and also from our karma, from our soul's imprint. And so the soul represents the nonverbal, unconscious, subconscious part of us, and the sun represents the conscious part of us, the conscious will. The earth is an astrological symbol as well, and it represents how we ground the totality of who we are in this material experience. It's essentially, how do we manifest, and where do we manifest? The house that the earth is in and the sign that it's in. Which, by the way, the earth is always opposite the sun. And so if you want to know, where's my earth in my chart? It's in the opposite sign to your sun sign. It's in the opposite house as your sun sign's house. And this is really where you have the embodied experience. So every sun sign that we are also connects to the earth, and we're always operating between those two. And I find it so interesting that twins will gravitate toward the polar opposites of those. So one will be completely in the sign of Leo, and one will be completely in the sign of Aquarius, the opposite sign. And so they're finding their own way of individuating along that continuum, along that axis line. And so a lot of times when we are moving through an eclipse, the shadow aspects of ourselves are the ones that we experience in the opposite sign as our sun sign. And so if you're a Scorpio, you might be really annoyed with the Taurus traits of yourself, or with people who represent hoarding or represent, these are the shadow aspects of Taurus. Don't worry, Taurus. I know we love you, Taurus. But you might be aware of people who are taking their time with things, who aren't as serious about accomplishing things, who need a little bit more rest, who are more sensually oriented, or people who are stubborn. Those shadow aspects of Taurus. And every sign is going to have its own version of that. Every eclipse is going to bring things up from the subconscious mind, and it's going to allow you to revel in your shadows. And I like to say that we are all shadow dancing during eclipses. So a lot of times relationships go through really big cathartic moments, sometimes make it or break it moments, because we're not engaging with one another's conscious self. We're engaging with one another's shadows. Eclipses are full moons and new moons that are really close to the transiting lunar nodes. So we have the nodes being involved. We have the nodes pointing us in the direction of where we need to be looking. Collectively, this is happening, and also personally. Let's start with the lunar eclipse on March 13th. And this eclipse is happening with the moon in Virgo and the sun in Pisces. And this axis line between Virgo and Pisces is where The North and South Node are the North nodes in Pisces, the South nodes in Virgo. And this axis line features themes of healing, well-being, spirituality, and service. It's also that axis line between the physical, tangible, routine aspects of our lives and the mystical, otherworldly aspects of our lives. It's how we ground our spirituality in our daily practices and rituals and routines. And so health, well-being, healing is a big function of this lunation. So is the theme of endings. The sun's in Pisces, and the sun's right next to the North Node. And that influence of Pisces shows us the ways in which we are dying to aspects of our lives or aspects of our culture that have really outworn their usefulness. And health is so important with this eclipse and with this lunation. So be sure to boost your immune system. Be sure to, wear a mask if you're feeling sick. That way you're not spreading anything. And also, I think we're really going to have to watch things like the bird flu, the avian flu, and different health-related conditions. I know here in California, a lot of people have been talking about just the fallout from the fires. And I know there are fires in the Carolinas right now. And so protect your lungs, protect your health. Also, the Schumann resonance has been off the charts, which relates to solar flares, solar activity. And a lot of people have been talking about headaches or dizziness, vertigo, things like that. So I think some of these topics could be things that we are paying attention to. Eclipses also relate to the shifting of tectonic plates, like through earthquakes or through volcanoes. And it wouldn't surprise me if we had some of that kind of seismic activity because we're dealing with Virgo, which is an earth sign. It is the sign that helps us weed out what is disharmonious or chaotic. Virgo helps us to bring order to systems. And so think about what kind of chaotic events or activities or relationships can you filter out right now? And if those relationships are with dear family members and loved ones, we don't want to end those relationships, then how can you take care of yourself in the midst of those relationships with people who are creating chaos in your life? This is a time of weeding out what doesn't belong anymore and what you don't want to carry forward. And in its place, just leaving some negative space, leaving some emptiness. Don't try to fill those empty, hollow spaces with things or people. Keep some spaciousness because there are so many new beginnings that are on the horizon, and we want space to have creative abilities and possibilities when we move further into the year. This lunation features an aspect to Uranus, and Uranus is that planetary change agent. So the eclipse itself is like a wild card, and the influence of Uranus is another wild card. So expect the unexpected is kind of like your mantra for this time. We also have the sun right next to Saturn. And Saturn's influence is going to be palpable. We have the moon opposite Saturn. So a lot of stifled emotions that don't have a way out or an expression. And this could feel like a pressure cooker. And because Mercury is literally at a standstill, stationing retrograde, we don't have a way of communicating what our needs are, what's happening to us. And so we have to be diligent about expressing ourselves and bringing things out into the open. The other thing that's happening with this eclipse is that Neptune is right at the 29th degree of Pisces. And Neptune at that degree is really unfocused. And so your spiritual ideals, your sense of what's true and what's not, your access to truth in the news, all of this is foggy right now. And so don't believe everything you hear and don't believe everything you see, and be willing to ask questions and to let go of what you think you know to be true and be curious instead. This eclipse is going to be especially significant for those of you born in mutable signs. So that's you, Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. You're going to feel this the most. I would also say our earth signs, so we're going to add Taurus and Capricorn to this. You're going to feel this too. And that's partly because of the influence of Uranus and the moon being in an earth sign. Libra and Aries had it last year with the eclipses in your signs. So you get a nice little break. I mean, we're all going to feel this. This is going to be big for all of us. Aries for you, and Libra too, I think, not as much as Aries, but Aries for you, with Venus moving through your sign, with Mercury stationing retrograde in your sign. I think it's going to be a time of really filtering out what kinds of things you do for under obligation that you don't want to do anymore, and how can you be more self-directed in this moment so that you're creating your own future. And so what that means is that you could be asked to do things that you don't quite want to do, and you could have to set boundaries and say no. Libra, I think this is going to be true for you as well. And Cancer, it's definitely true for you with Mars in Cancer in your sign. You're already being asked to think about boundaries and self-protection and advocating for others. And you're being asked to create a nice little shell to contain your energy right now at this time. Really wrapping up a series of eclipses that happened in last year in 2024, when we had eclipses in April and late March, and eclipses again in October 2nd of 2024. Those eclipses were along the Libra-Aries axis line. And this one, even though the North Node is in Pisces, and we're dealing with different themes with these Saros cycles, this eclipse wraps up business that's been going on for about a year. So think about what was happening for you at the time of the Great American Total Eclipse in April of 2024. This is like the ribbon on a package. This is like the cherry on top of a sundae. This eclipse is a finishing business eclipse. The sun and moon are at 9 degrees Aries, and the Sabian symbol for this is a crystal gazer. This eclipse features that tension. It's like we're standing at a threshold between Pisces, which is where Neptune is, which is where the North Node is, and Venus and Saturn. So we've got those 4 points right in the last degrees of the zodiac. There's a rebirth happening, and we have to go through some pain points in order to get there. But the new beginning, which is where Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. We've got the sun and the moon both at those points. We've got Mercury at that 0 degree Aries point. That's a world point. And so Mercury is giving us an indication of where we're moving, and it's a global impact. Mercury is moving backwards. It's moving back into Pisces. So I think there's going to be some kind of major world event that rouses compassion, because as Mercury goes back into Pisces, we're going to be talking about what we can do to heal the world, heal one another. And 0 degrees Aries is one of those initiating degrees. So you might be led, inspired to do something in your own life that's really exciting, that moves you forward into a new chapter of your life. So there's this tension between what we're leaving, what we're walking away from, and what we're moving into. And I think there's going to be a lot of wild news over those couple of weeks between March 13th and March 29th. There's a lot of astrological activity happening, and like I said, it's the combination of endings and beginnings. This eclipse chart features an interesting relationship between Mars, which is the planet that relates to what we're protecting, what we're defending, how we're speaking up for other people and for ourselves. It's the planet of how we enforce our boundaries. It's also the planet that relates to military activity. And Mars is in a challenging square aspect with Chiron and Eris. Mars is in a square aspect with Chiron. Chiron's a little planetoid that's kind of between an asteroid and a comet, and Eris, which is a dwarf planet that relates to discord for progressive change. So with Chiron, we have all of the pain points of culture and of our lives showing themselves and saying, hey, I need healing. And the influence of Eris is a little bit like a tornado that comes and clears things out to create a baseline for that healing. And then the influence of Mars is, how do we protect those who are suffering, those who are hurt? Or for ourselves, how do we protect ourselves from hurt, from suffering? And so we've got a big revolutionary moment right here. And then you add to that Mars's relationship with Uranus, and Uranus is an element of instability that asks us to think about what we're going to do to progress, to grow, and to change. This is one of those eclipses that every sign is going to feel, but especially you cardinal signs. So Aries, Libra, Cancer, and Capricorn. This is one that reminds you of some of the stressful points that were happening in 2024 with those eclipses. Anytime there's an eclipse that aligns with your sun, your moon, your rising, one of your planets, it shakes things up. And so things can happen suddenly, unexpectedly, that fast forward your life. So it can be really exciting. It can also be like sort of anxiety producing. But anything that happens during the 2 weeks between eclipses and just on the heels of an eclipse, those are fated events. Those are things that you came here to experience. No matter how wonderful and amazing they are or how challenging they are, this is soul level stuff. Anything could happen. So that means that if you have a project that you're trying to fundraise for or a film that you're producing, have your elevator pitch ready. Have a pitch deck standing by in case you meet someone who can open a door for you. If you are in love with someone and you are looking at moving your relationship to the next level, think about getting engaged, moving in together. Be prepared for anything. That also goes for if you live in an area that's prone to dramatic weather or prone to earthquakes. Just have some extra food on hand, have some battery backups for your phone. Just be prepared for those kinds of things too. The energies represent a convergence of astrological signatures. And when we have 3 or more big astrological events happening within a short period of time, we often see major events happening in our personal lives and in the world, and including weather events. So we want to be prepared. We want to be hopeful and optimistic and hold our intentions. And we also want to think about what we can do in the event of some kind of an emergency or some kind of major life transition. There you go. That is your astrology of March in a nutshell. For more information, check out my website, rachellangastrologer.com. I've got a whole write-up in the horoscopes section all about this month and what it means for your sign. Also, if you want to connect with others who are on this journey with you, then join us for a retreat in Sedona. This is going to happen at the very last weekend of March, that eclipse weekend, that Neptune and Aries weekend. And it's a retreat all about Neptune and Aries. Neptune and Aries arises. So we'll have 3 days of activations, embodiment exercises, art, music, and lots of discussions about this significant transit, this 14-year cycle that we're getting ready to move into. So join us for that. For your cosmic call to action of the week, I invite you to rest, to get good sleep, and make it a priority. Because during eclipses, during this kind of big astrology, there's a lot that happens in our dreams, and there's a lot of resetting that we're doing of our energy systems when we sleep. So the best thing that you can do to prepare yourself to ride the waves of this energy is to get lots of good rest. And for extra credit, as a bonus, keep track of your dreams. Yeah. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for being here. And we will be back next week with more astrological conversation to help provide you with the guidance you need to move through this historical, amazing, and wild time. Thank you so much.